Good afternoon. Thanks for being here. Although, this is your place, your facility, your great school. My name is Derek Slapp. I'm a relatively new state senator, just elected February 26th in a special election. And Farmington, most of Farmington, West Hartford, all of Burlington, and a slice of Bloomfield is in the 5th district. So that's one of the reasons that I'm here. And I'm just really here to mainly welcome you all and to kind of set up the event for everybody else. I have a few colleagues too, you'll hear from them later, but the Higher Education Committee, as you probably heard, Representative D'Amico is here too. Awesome. Mike D'Amico from Farmington is here. And Representative Exum, Tammy Exum is here as well. And then the two chairs of the Higher Education Committee in the General Assembly, Senator Haskell and Representative Haddad. You're going to hear from them later on, but it's really because of their leadership that we passed this debt-free community college program that you probably have heard a lot about. So they're going to fill you in on more of the details, but I really applaud them for understanding what a critical need this is. I believe, and they might correct me if I'm wrong, but Connecticut is one of the worst states in the country when it comes to indebtedness of folks who are graduating from college. I believe it's about $36,000 a year. Does that sound about right? Yeah, 39. So we can definitely make improvements. This is a national problem too. I mean, you're hearing about this on the national campaign trail too. Everybody has different ideas to try to tackle this, but we certainly can't sit back and wait for Congress to do something on a national level. I think we really do need to tackle this. And the General Assembly, thanks to their leadership, taking some really positive steps. So I'm not going to filibuster. That's what we in politics say, right? We just go on and on and on. So I'm going to hand off to my colleagues. But before I do, I want to introduce Daryl Rio. Many of you probably know him. He is the campus CEO here. And then he's going to introduce somebody else, and we'll get rolling with the program. But thanks again. Thanks for all you do. And you help our economy. You help strengthen our middle class and grow jobs, and you play such a pivotal role here. So I just wanted to make sure I came here and acknowledge all the hard work that you do. So thank you very much.
Thanks for that introduction. There's a few people in the room that don't know me, so my name is Daryl Rim. I'm the campus CEO today. I see a lot of familiar faces here, so thank you all for joining us. As you all have noticed, the conversations regarding debt-free college have been taking shape stateside. So, it's important to have this conversation because there's a combination of faculty, staff, and students here. People are constantly asking the really hard and important questions. So I thought it important, to not only be transparent, but to sort of continue with that communication. We need to have these conversations now. Students especially need to have a voice. We all do. So I'm certainly appreciative of Senator Will Haskell and State Representative Haddad to come here on behalf of the Higher Ed and Employment Advancement Committee. I also would like to commend President Ojakian. I'm going to introduce him in a minute. He is also sort of trailblazing and leading the conversation as well. He's made this certainly an important topic to pursue in the coming months, so I have to commend him for that. So I do want to thank Haskell and Haddad for being here. I know you've been part of a tour, and we're probably one of the last stops, so I'm just glad that you're here because it benefits all of us. And you certainly have everyone here today, so my thanks to you. So at this time, I do want to introduce President of our system, President Mark Ojakian, for his remarks. So thank you all for coming.
Well, thank you, Daryl. And unlike Senator Slapp, who is my senator, I'm going to be brief. But it's my pleasure to be here again to welcome our guests. As you know, student debt is a problem, not only in Connecticut, but all around the country. And you also know that one of my key pillars of my administration is to make sure that college is affordable and accessible for all students, and that the barriers are broken down so everybody has a chance to succeed. And I want to thank Senator Haskell and Representative Haddad for their leadership in this area. We continue to work with them to make sure we're ready to go, to make sure we can start marketing this to prospective college students, and to make sure when we get ready to accept students in the fall of 20, that this is going to be a program that's going to serve as a national model. I will continue to work with both of them and whoever else I need to work with to make sure that the bill moves forward, is funded properly, and we can have a win for the state of Connecticut and especially its students. And with that, I'd like to introduce somebody who's been a real advocate for students and for faculty and staff on campuses, the president of the 4 Cs, Maureen Chalmers, who will come down and say a few words.
So much. Hello, everyone. We're getting quite excited about this becoming a reality. The Congress of Connecticut Community Colleges, which is a union that represents the faculty and professional staff on the community colleges, has been working on this for decades. We are people who stand in front of students on a daily basis, and we see so much hope and excitement in our students. And in some of our student size, we see the hope fade because financially they're struggling and they're taking on debt in order to take on the American dream. And we have faculty who have a shelf in their office that has books that they can give to the students because the students can't afford the books. And we have food pantries on our campuses that our faculty and professional staff are producing and generating funds in order to buy the food for these pantries so that our students don't have to worry about food. We've tried on so many levels to make sure that their hope that they have when they start at the beginning of their academic careers continues through to the end. But we've seen students who go from full-time to part-time because they can't afford snow tires and they're not going to be able to, they have to take on another job, or they won't come that next semester because their washer or dryer is broken and they need to take on a second job. So if we are able to provide students that are able to go full-time the ability to do this without taking on debt, we're helping our economy in the state. What do we grow? We grow a well-educated workforce. And the sooner our students can get through the programs that they need in order to achieve a well-paying job, they become contributors to our community. And so I'm thrilled that our representatives and senators are finally getting this to the end zone, and the faculty and professional staff on so many of the campuses are really believing that it's going to come true. And we are here to support your efforts to get the word out, to work with the BOR to make sure that you have the best information you need in order to make sure that what you create is the most responsive to the largest number of our students. So thank you so much for all that you're doing, and would love to hear more about what your plans are. Thank you.
Mike, Tammy, you want to say anything? You want to say anything?
I'd like to hear the plan, actually. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for having us here. And it's a huge problem, as Maureen just described, all the real technical, or practical, problems as far as being able to afford basic necessities besides tuition. So we need to fix that. And Gregg is going to tell us how to fix it.
I would just like to say hello. It's a pleasure to be here. I love being in a place of learning. I love being in this classroom. And I just want to tell you that I had a son who graduated out of Tunxis. In December he finished, he marched in May. And I was very impressed with his experience here. He was fortunate that he did not have to worry about a lot of the issues that we hear coming forward. But boy, is that a real issue. We know so many people, so many friends, so many students who are burdened and they can't do what they need to do. Another thing I loved hearing was the demographics. When at graduation, when you talked about the makeup of the students who come to Tunxis and the opportunity that exists when you can have an education and what it can give to our economy. So I'm excited about being here. And thank you so much. I can't wait to hear more about the plan. Like Mike, well, not like Mike. Like Derek, I guess I'm very new. As Derek moved to the Senate seat, I took the House seat that was vacated, so I entered the end of April. So I'm thankful to be here today. Nice being with you.
Right.
Yeah.
So Will and I have been visiting community colleges all across the state to talk about this proposal. I'm going to disappoint you, Mike. I'm not going to tell you how to solve it. That's Will's responsibility today. I'm going to go through how we got there, and then Will's going to talk a little bit about the plan dynamics. But I did want to just tell everybody in the room that you have a great delegation representing you at the Capitol. Representative Exum, Representative D'Amico, Senator Slapp, really have been champions at the state capitol for this institution and for institutions like it all across the state. I think all of us have a really deep appreciation of the value of community colleges in our state. They educate an enormous number of students at a very affordable rate. They provide real quality education that can be used to help those students enhance their lives. I learned a lot about community colleges from my mentor. I started, I'm in my 9th year as a elected member of the General Assembly. Prior to that, I was a staff member at the Capitol, where I worked first with Mary Ann Handley. She's a state senator from Manchester, and she was a community college professor for 30 years prior to being elected to the state senate. And I think it was in 1998, maybe 97 or 98, that she first introduced a free community college bill. I remember going out with her as her staff person to Manchester Community College to announce it in what was the Low Building then. I think it's still called the Low Building. But it was, and that was 20 years ago. So this is not a new idea, and it's not one that's terribly innovative anymore. There have been a number of states across the country that have done a version of what we hope to do here in Connecticut. Places like Tennessee, and more interesting, Rhode Island and New York both have versions of free community college program or state college programs. And so we've been learning from what's been going on around the country to sort of figure out how to address our problems. But my job is to tell you a little bit about the problems. And so I'll say that when we look at the landscape for higher education, we see problems really through 3 different lenses. First is just the lens of the individual student, right? We want to make sure that every student who graduates high school and who wants to move on in the state of Connecticut understands that they have the opportunity to get an affordable education in Connecticut. We know that when students first go to college but drop out, that one of the primary reasons why they drop out is because of the cost of tuition. Community colleges do a better job than most, but we know that happens even here, that there are some students that just can't afford it. You guys probably know that better than I do. We know from our employers that this is increasingly a concern for them. When we meet with employers in the state of Connecticut, they are more and more worried about where they're going to get the educated workforce that they need to grow their businesses in Connecticut. So when I was sitting with the HR director at Electric Boat, for example, she said she didn't know whether or not she was going to meet the hiring quotas that she needed in order to meet the military's timeline for how they were going to do the work that they've been awarded downstate. So they're aggressively involved in working with workforce development boards and others to increase the number of credentialed workers in Connecticut. I want to mention that we're not just talking about bachelor's degrees or associate's degrees, we're also talking about other credentials. And again, these are sort of one of the great aspects of community colleges is that you offer a lot of those credentialing programs in advanced manufacturing or even in other high need areas like nursing that will help those students become gainfully employed and meet employer needs. It's really important. We have a statewide strategic plan in Connecticut, and it pretty clearly outlines the need to have a workforce that has a high degree of post-secondary credentials. In fact, we have a target of having 70% of our workforce have some level of post-secondary education by the year 2025. And we are short of that goal at this point. I think that we're closer to 56%, depends on how you measure it, but we're not at 70% yet. And what that means for our employers is that they're not likely to find homegrown workers to do the work that they need to do. Or what I really fear is that the smaller businesses, where most of that growth in jobs will come from, may decide to transplant themselves out of state to a place where they can get the workforce that they need. And those are jobs, frankly, that we need here in Connecticut to grow our economy and sort of get ourselves back on track. And so we take filling that need very seriously. And the last prism that we look at is really just the fiscal health of our colleges. We all know what the demographic trends are, right? There's a projected decline in the number of traditional college-age students across the country, and it's particularly hitting northeastern states harder. So we expect as much as a 15% decline in this population. This is sort of the bread and butter for colleges and universities. They're the folks who increasingly rely on to pay the bills and turn on the lights at our community colleges. And so with that kind of a steep decline in enrollment, it becomes more and more important for us to figure out how we can mitigate that. Some people predict that if there's a 15% decline in students, that you might see a 15% decline in the number of institutions nationally that provide post-secondary training. If that's going to happen, I think it's really important to us as a committee that be felt not in our public sector, but rather in the sort of for-profit post-secondary school sector. Those are the folks who I think offer, in many instances, the lowest value at the highest cost for post-secondary degrees. And so we're intent on making sure that we're incentivizing students to go to our public institutions and really helping to balance the budgets of our community colleges. It's really just that simple. We looked at other states. Massachusetts, for example, in the last 5 years has seen over a dozen college closures or mergers. And so we've seen the tip of the iceberg of that here in Connecticut as well, with the merger of Sacred Heart and St. Vincent's. And so we need to make sure that if we're going to have institutions be impacted by having fewer students, that we're doing what we can to drive students into our public universities and colleges to make sure that place where we get the biggest bang for our buck are the ones that sort of stick around. After all of that, we looked around the country for possible solutions, and again, a lot of our neighboring states and other states have looked at free college programs as a way of solving some of these problems, and we tended to agree. And so I'll let Will talk a little bit about the solution that we came up with, the challenge that's ahead, and what you guys can do to help us meet those remaining challenges. Right? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Representative Haddad. I'm so thrilled to be here with the Hartford delegation, the West Hartford delegation, the Tunxis delegation. This legislation and this program would not have passed without their tireless advocacy. So, the Farmington delegation. So thank you to Senator Slapp, Representative D'Amico, and Representative Exum, not only for being here, not only for tirelessly advocating for this campus, but also for being a strong voice in support of debt-free community college. I'm brand new to the legislature. I was really thrilled to be appointed as chair of the Higher Education Committee and to work with Representative Haddad, who's been there for much longer and knows how the process works much better than I do. One of the first things that he gave me when I got there was the Strategic Master Plan for Higher Education, commissioned years ago by the legislature. It brought a lot of stakeholders to the table, professors, students, business leaders, and it said, Gregg already said this statistic, but I want to hammer this home. It said that 70% of jobs in Connecticut are going to require a degree beyond a high school diploma by 2025. That's around the corner, and it doesn't match the decline in enrollment that we see at our community colleges. We simply need to be producing more highly skilled, highly educated workers in order to meet and fill 21st century jobs. That's why in this most recent budget, we passed the debt-free community college plan. And I'm really grateful that the Board of Regents has been our partner every step of the way, but so too have community college professors. They, as Maureen said, see this problem firsthand. My grandfather is a adjunct professor at Norwalk Community College. He sees firsthand how difficult it is for his students to afford the chemistry classes and the chemistry textbooks that are required for his course. This morning, we were at Naugatuck Valley Community College, and the college president whispered to me halfway through the program. She said, we have some professors who actually do laundry for their students because their students are suffering with homelessness or other housing insecurity issues, and there are professors who take on that responsibility on behalf of their students. We know that there's a huge affordability barrier, and we're trying to bring that down with this program. So the specifics of the program, it's a last dollar approach. As wonderful as the things that are being discussed on the Democratic presidential debate stage sound, we are in tough fiscal times in Connecticut, and we can't afford to get rid of all tuition or to forgive all student debt. What we can afford to do is say, hey, after you've applied for all the federal, all the state, all the possible institutional aid, if you still owe $400 or $40, the state will pick up the rest of the tab so that you don't go into debt in order to earn your degree. That last dollar approach is actually, we find, quite affordable. The Office of Fiscal Analysis, nonpartisan policy wonks who work in Hartford estimate that making sure that no student goes into debt in order to earn their degree, it costs around $6.1 million. But here's what's really exciting. When the program requires that every student fill out the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, we've seen from other states that students who fill out the FAFSA realize that they qualify for federal aid that they might not otherwise have known about. So when more students fill out that form, we start to see more federal programs like Pell Grants coming into Connecticut. So for the $6.1 million that we invest, we actually see $7.6 million come into the community college system. We know that that money is so desperately needed on your campus to make sure that our classrooms meet 21st century technology needs, to make sure that students aren't going hungry, to make sure that professors are adequately paid and appreciated. So we could use that $7.6 million. And frankly, Connecticut sends so much money to Washington, D.C. This is an opportunity for us to start to reclaim some of our tax dollars and make sure that we're taking full advantage of those federal programs that already exist. I also want to mention that this program is also is open to adult learners. It's not just those who recently graduated from high school. Anybody who has never pursued a degree beyond a high school diploma is allowed to enroll. And this is a huge opportunity for Connecticut's economy. There are around 635,000 people in Connecticut who are between the ages of 25 and 64 who have never pursued any degree beyond a high school diploma. If we can get even half of them to come back to school and to enroll in community college and to perhaps earn their associate's degree, we will see an additional $2 billion in taxable wages in Connecticut every single year. Because when you earn an associate's degree, I'm preaching to the choir here because you are all already at Tunxis, but when you earn an associate's degree, your earnings potential increases dramatically on an annual basis. So this isn't just the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do for Connecticut's economy. Senator Slapp mentioned that the student loan problem is an issue across the country, but it really does hit particularly hard here in Connecticut. We have the third highest student loan debt in the country. That holds young people back when they're trying to buy their first home by an average of 7 years, the studies find, when they're trying to start a family, when they're trying to start a small business, when they're trying to buy our first car. Every element of our economy is hampered by the cloud of student debt that hangs over all of our heads. So I'm tremendously proud of this program, and I do want to mention one final element, and that's there may be students in the room or students who hear about this program who say, you know what, I actually am fully covered by institutional, state, and federal aid programs. I don't have any gap in my tuition, but it's still really hard for me to afford transportation, childcare, all the other investments that are necessary in order to be a full-time student, which is required for this program. For those folks, there's a $250 minimum grant. We want to make sure that we are offering a helping hand, even for those who might be in the lower income bracket, but still are struggling to meet those expenses, because we know that being a student costs a lot more than just the sticker price of tuition. Textbooks alone, I was stunned by how much my textbooks cost when I was in school only a few years ago. So this program, I think, is progressive, it's forward-looking, it makes a promise to every high school student in Connecticut that college is an affordable option for you, regardless of your family income, regardless of your personal background. And it also makes a promise to businesses that we are going to provide the skilled, talented workforce that you need to succeed in the 21st century. I represent Fairfield County, and when GE left, it had huge ramifications across the state, but also especially in my district. GE went to Massachusetts. That's a place that a lot of my colleagues call Taxachusetts. I don't think they left Connecticut because of our high taxes here. I think they left Connecticut for the reasons that they actually stated in their goodbye letter. Their CEO said, Connecticut couldn't provide a young, diverse, tech-savvy workforce. With this program, we're ready to change that. But it would not have happened without Representative Haddad, and because I think this is one of our last stops on the community college tour, I just want to mention that he has navigated this just expertly through the legislative process, and we are at the final step, and we need your help, to be perfectly honest. the governor has accepted responsibility in the budget to fund this program either through the iLottery program, which would raise over $60 million over the next 5 years, more than enough to cover the cost of this program, or if he doesn't want to, if he doesn't believe in iLottery, if he doesn't want that to be the funding source, he has to propose an alternate funding source. We want to make sure that that happens because we cannot possibly be in the business of offering empty promises to students and their families. And we're grateful that he's accepted the responsibility, but we want to make sure that he and his administration deliver on that promise. So a really important step of being here today is when you leave, if you wouldn't mind filling out one of these postcards, which thanks the governor for supporting the Debt-Free Community College initiative and asks that he work expeditiously with his team to fully vet a funding source that is sustainable and that fulfills the central promise of this program. So please, 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 on your way out, fill out one of these postcards. We'll make sure to get it to his office. It will go a long way in making this a reality. Okay, before we wrap up, we do want to take any questions that you have. But before we wrap up, the most important voice in our committee, in everything that we do in the legislature that's focused on higher ed, has to be the voice of students. And as the youngest member of the General Assembly, I'm constantly trying to make sure that the next generation has a seat at the table. So I'm really grateful that we have Joshua, the SGA president, here with us today to say a few words and to provide the perspective of students here at Tunxis. So Joshua, thank you so much for being here.
So, hello everybody. For those of you that don't know, my name is Joshua Soldevila and I am the student government president of Tunxis Community College. Everything that I got today sounds really good to me. I feel that that's one of the main issues that we really have in this society that was even an issue for me at first. Money is really a tight situation and I feel like it shouldn't hold you back when there are so many students that are out there that could really succeed in this world. One of the things that we try to do as a part of SGA to kind of limit that money gap is today I had ordered pizzas for the SGA room, the student lounge, and I wanted to ensure that although I can't help with like car payments or be able to help with rent or anything like that, one of the main issues is that students need to eat. So by having pizzas in the student lounge, it creates two things that I like to see. One of them is that people are together enjoying each other's company, and the second one is that you're able to feed yourself and at least have some sort of meal for the day. One of my friends was really struggling with being able to come to school and eat, so he wouldn't eat all day, and that kind of bothered me. So I would make him something to eat. It would come out of my own pocket, but I feel as though if you really care about somebody, you'll do something like that. So when I see the debt-free thing, I would have loved for it to be a couple of years ago, but it is what it is. But I'm just happy that there's finally going to be a change, because at the end of the day, there's always a younger generation than us. My little sister will be going to college, and it would be good to know that she'll be able to go to college and not worry about any debt or anything like that. As for the students, my main priority is the students. I want to make sure that everybody is enjoying themselves while they go to college, and I want to make sure that their time here is one to be remembered for a good reason. Not, oh, I had to drop out of college because of so and so reasons. I want to make sure that they know that if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish great things. Although you may be struggling right now, just ask for the help. A lot of the students don't really ask for help, and I always tell them, why not? You know, like little kids do, why? You gotta be able to ask those questions. You know, you gotta be able to get back up and pick it up, because there are people to be able to help you. So by having this right here, it's a great way to show we're here for you. We got your help and we're able to help you out. You just gotta be able to speak your mind. A lot of students don't like speaking their mind, and it kind of baffles me, because if you do speak your mind, great things can happen. Before I became SGA president, I was just a student that would come and go to school. I never really stood around a lot, and I kind of just, I guess you could say, floated. I didn't really have any weight in the school. And one of the main reasons I ended up changing it is because my cousin was the treasurer. He was the treasurer here before. His name is Mark Santana. And he ended up changing my life a lot because he said, you do a lot of thinking and you don't just do what you want. Go ahead and do what you want. If no matter what happens, as long as you try, that's what matters. So what I said to myself was, well, I want to be a part of SGA. So I ended up talking to the vice president of SGA previously, and I said, I would like to join SGA. I wanted to join as a regular member, and then she said, you want to run for something? And I was like, what am I running for? And she ended up saying, well, you could run for, different positions to be able to tell people how you feel. So my cousin was saying, oh, maybe you should run for secretary. And then I was like, yeah, let's go for president. And it's actually benefited my life a lot. And I feel like a lot of other students should know that we're here for each other. It's a community college. We're a community. So that's the type of environment that I like to bring to the college, and to know that there are other people supporting that cause as well makes me really happy. Thank you.
Joshua, you sound like a great example of what community colleges can do for students.
Thank you very much.
So thanks for sharing your comments. We're here for questions. I don't know if people have any questions or concerns. We're here to.
Hi, my name's Aubrey Strong. I'm the Phi Theta Kappa president and political awareness committee secretary. I applaud this initiative. I'm excited about it. I think it's wonderful. I just have one question. If the EFC is 0, the estimated family contribution is 0, this works out great. But if a spouse is married and their partner makes enough to be considered not needing of aid, then the family contribution, the minimum of $250 per semester for them would be awesome. But what if it doesn't cover the childcare? What if the childcare is not what they need? So I'm just curious where that sweet spot is of, you make too much, you don't make enough, you can get this money or you can't.
So the program as it's currently designed doesn't have an income level. What we're saying is that once you get your financial aid package from the school, you take the total amount of federal grants, state scholarships that might be available, any private scholarships that you've got, that we will provide the minimum of either $250 for all students, or the difference between your financial aid package and tuition and mandatory fees.
Right, I understand that.
So even if actually the program tends to help students more and more as their EFC grows, because presumably you wouldn't be eligible for federal grants at a certain point. State grants would drop off because they're need-based, and the remaining gap would be larger and larger. We would cover the gap.
Okay, because with FAFSA, as you know, it's based off of estimated family contributions, so
Right.
that kind of hinders them. I've had people come to me and say, I have problems paying for college because my family makes too much, whether they're 18 or they're a married person of 35 or whatever.
Yeah, right.
That was their problem, so this would solve that. You're saying.
It's interesting that it's called estimated family contribution, because if you look at the numbers, it's like, I don't know very many families who can afford to make those estimated family contributions. They're a measure of something, but I don't actually think they're a measure of how capable a family can make that estimated family contribution. Our intention is to eliminate out-of-pocket expenses, really, for all of the students for the direct costs of tuition and mandatory fees for community colleges.
And I would just
I'll let her know, because I just know a few people. I mean, I've had great coverage, but my EFC is 0 and I have no money to save. It works for me, but.
Sure.
I would just add that I don't think any of the elected officials who are here would want this to be misinterpreted as a cure-all to the problem. I think it's very much, at least we're viewing it as a first step in terms of college affordability. It doesn't include part-time students, and there are a ton of part-time students.
Right.
This morning at Tunxis, at Naugatuck Valley Community College, a young woman raised her hand and she said she's a part-time student because she has a young daughter and she can't possibly enroll full-time, and she wanted to know how this program would help her. And the most honest answer we could give is that it probably won't yet, but if this program is successful, if we do see the boost in enrollment that our neighbors have seen with similar programs, if we do see increased not only students but resources flowing to our community colleges, then we can start to expand it, expand eligibility. We can talk about UConn and our state universities and how to make those more affordable. There's a lot more that we need to do in terms of college affordability. This is very much a first step.
No, that's great. Thank you for answering my question.
Just in terms of, just clarification, in terms of the debt figures you spoke about and then talking about rolling out the programs for UConn and the CSUs, the institutions that are driving the debt figure in Connecticut, I believe that you're talking about are not community colleges, the CSUs or UConn. So is there, I'm assuming there's no plan moving forward to help Yale, Trinity, Wesleyan.
Well, maybe if Yale would be willing to
I
share
know,
part
right?
of that $30 million
Unless they're willing
endowment.
to share their endowment, right?
We'd have no problem at all. And actually, I mean, I will give them some credit. They make
Yes.
an enormous contribution to the
Yeah.
New Haven Promise
Sure, yeah.
program and are stepping up. But even at UConn, I will say that the average student leaves UConn with a debt of about $25,000. Some are zero, some are much more. But increasingly, as enrollments have been declining, tuition's increasing, and frankly, state support has been harder and harder to appropriate and to allocate. Something that Senator Haskell and I have been a trend that we've been fighting. More and more of the burden of paying for tuition falls on students themselves, and so these free college programs, these debt-free college programs around the state, around the country, I think are also a way of effectively reversing the trend of a disinvestment from public colleges and universities, and it's one of the features I like most about it. But it does go through the hands of students first.
But it's really just directed towards, at this point, community colleges, perhaps at some point maybe the CSUs and UConn. And have you heard from any of the constituent units about potentially being concerned about losing their enrollment to this program, because of this program?
To the extent we can introduce some competition to the market and challenge some of the other providers to lower their tuition costs, I'm okay with that. I'm actually excited about that possibility of this program, that potential outcome. I'll say that the reason we're focused on community colleges from the outset is that by far and away, these are the students who are most likely to stick around in Connecticut 5 years after, to become contributing members of Connecticut's workforce. Yale students too often pick up and leave. The same as UConn students stick around, I think around over 80%, but it's more than 90% of community college graduates are still in Connecticut working in this state 5 years after graduation. So we couldn't think possibly of a better place to start. Mike, did you want to say something about that?
I don't want to monopolize because I can talk to you guys anytime, but I'm just curious. So you said this would cost about $6 million annually?
When we passed the bill, that was the fiscal note. That was based on the data that we had when we passed the bill. That was the best estimate that we put together. We're currently getting new data, and we are vetting the numbers. The Board of Regents has a different analysis that shows that might be more expensive. So we're vetting those numbers and working very closely with them to sort of figure out how we can match whatever revenue might be available through the iLottery program or some other revenue source, and the program requirements itself.
And that's what struck me is, as you just mentioned a couple minutes ago, the funding, unfortunately, the funding for education in general has remained flat, if not slightly decreasing. So, given that trend, what makes us think that the legislature or the powers that be are going to be any more willing to cough up money for this when they're not willing to cough up money for the last 10 years for education in general?
Yeah. Two things I would say. One is, I think that we've done, as you know, done a lot of work to sort of address the structural problems of our budget, right? So we've been renegotiating pension payments for state employees. We're continuing that work. There's a couple of additional, they're big nuts, but they're accomplishable. I sort of see the light at the end of the tunnel. At the same time, we have been disinvesting from public education, and higher education in particular. If you look at the portion of our state budget that's been going to higher ed over the last 10 years, we haven't been faring very well. So I think there's an appetite at the legislature to begin to reinvest, and the iLottery proposal in particular, which is not something that Will and I are particular fans of, right? I'll be clear. This is an initiative that's been promoted by the Connecticut Lottery Corporation. They would like to be able to begin to sell Powerball tickets, that sort of thing, through your phone, right? So instead of having to go into a gas station or go to a terminal, if it's a draw game, you can buy it through your phone. As it turns out, in other states where that's happened, it's been a very substantial sum of money that they've been able to raise as a result of that. And I think it's our leadership that looked at these two proposals. They had a revenue proposal from the Lottery Corporation and an expenditure proposal by the Higher Education Committee, and said, look, these actually look like they match up pretty well. And so we're now sort of attached at the hip a little bit to the Lottery Corporation. Again, the governor's doing his due diligence on that proposal. If that turns out to be feasible and sustainable, then that's a way of sort of adding resources that currently aren't in our budget to this program.
If I could just add briefly, part of the reason the price tag differed from the Office of Fiscal Analysis to the Board of Regents is that the Board of Regents has requested money to advertise this program, and I think that is so important. There's no point in doing any of this unless students actually hear about it and we do see the increase in enrollment and they start to realize that a promise has been made that higher education is going to be affordable and accessible to all. I was driving yesterday through New Haven and I heard an ad on the radio about tuition-free community college in Rhode Island. They're actually advertising in Connecticut, drawing our students across the border because there are affordable options over there. So we're going to need to make sure the Board of Regents has the resources to advertise this. And to Gregg's point, I've never heard of iLottery. I've never bought a Powerball ticket. But here's why I'm actually intrigued by the funding proposal. As I understand it, there is a decades-old unfulfilled promise in the legislature that lottery money would be spent on education. That has never really been realized, but wouldn't it be wonderful if now, as the lottery enters the 21st century, and it seems inevitable given how many other states have allowed some sort of gambling to happen on your iPhone, if that's going to happen in Connecticut, which it looks like it will, let's lock it down and make sure that it actually is spent on students and on education.
Yeah. Yes.
If this program will make tuition fees free for everyone, if a few years down the road we see that students are still borrowing significant amounts of money at our campuses, will this program be considered to have failed, or what?
If you don't realize the increase in enrollment, you're suggesting? Yeah, I mean, I think it speaks a little bit to the marketing and money that the Board of Regents has requested, but I also think that would go against the trend that we've seen in virtually every other state that's adopted a program like this. I will say that we're learning both what works and what doesn't work in other states. So in Rhode Island, they've had pretty substantial increases in enrollment. In New York, they have not. One of the reasons why they haven't seen that increase in enrollment in New York is that they've added too many caveats to their program, and there are a significant number of students who are reluctant to agree to all of what's in the fine print. For example, in their program, if you don't stay in New York and work in New York for a 5-year period after, your grant converts to a loan. That's not incorporated in this program. I mean, and again, I think Will spoke to the fact, we know that especially community colleges stay in Connecticut anyways. So even though I think that they'll have enhanced opportunity to go elsewhere, we trust that they will stay here, fill the jobs that we need to have filled, and we also believe that we can design a program that works and that will be close. We'll see the experience that's closer to what's been experienced in places like Rhode Island.
My other question is about the first-time, full-time requirement, which obviously is intended to capture new high school grads. Our history here, and I think around the system, is that adult students are a very significant part of our enrollment.
Yeah.
Was there any consideration given to accommodating that kind of person in this program?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So there isn't an age requirement. You have to have graduated from a Connecticut high school, but it doesn't say, as currently written, that has to have been in the last 5 years. So long as this is your first time, your first experience in higher education, your first time enrolling in any degree or certificate program, this is open to you. We were intentional about including adult learners because we do think that that's a crucial part.
I mean, it's the case that you mentioned from this morning. The full-time requirement is going to be a big problem for a lot of adult learners.
Absolutely,
And they're more likely to stay in Connecticut.
That's why we do this as a first step. We would, if the program works, if we do see an increase in enrollment, if we do see more resources coming into the community college system, let's expand eligibility. There's a lot more that we want to do as soon as we have the funding resources. And it'll be all that much easier. It'll be that much easier to convince our colleagues to invest in this program once we start to see the enrollment trends go the other way and start to increase. That's why this is only a first step.
I will say really two quick things. One is, we define full-time as 12 credits, right? We know that if you start off and continue to take at least 12 credits, hopefully even 15 credits, the completion rate is measurably better than for part-time students.
Mm-hmm.
So we felt like we wanted to build a component where we were really incentivizing completion of your program as well. And if you can get through the program where in a 2 or 2.5 or 3 year period of time, you're much more likely to actually get to your end goal. And so that's one thing that we wanted to recognize, at least as we began the program. The other thing is on, for returning students, I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to sort of make sure that we're developing programs that are offered in schedules that really work for non-traditional students. People who have children, people who need to take classes in the evening or on weekends. I think that's one of the things our committee is committed to focusing on this coming session and beyond is, what other things do we need to do to sort of get in place to help non-traditional older adults return to college and get the credentials and degrees that they need to do. We think we should be doing more work in making sure that smaller credentialed programs, something you could get maybe for 30 credits instead of 60 credits, are stackable into associate's degrees, and working as we've already begun to do to make sure associate's degrees are stackable into bachelor's degrees. So really thinking about the way that non-traditional students experience colleges, take smaller bits, and making sure they can stack into the credentials that'll really serve them well for the future. There's a lot of work to do in that area.
We have time for one more question?
Yeah.
I'm just curious, what percentage of students here at Tunxis are part-time versus full-time?
According to this website, I was listening to you, I was also
Yeah.
looking at demographics. I hate to be the rude person on your
Yeah.
phone. Part-time students is 55% according to bigfuture.collegeboard.org, which has all of Tunxis demographics, and the average student age, which I think is what he was trying to get at,
Yeah.
is 25.
Yeah.
Probably not first-timers, probably not gonna be full-timers. So he's just trying to get at, it's
Yeah.
a great program, and since it's going across all of Connecticut, it's
Yeah.
gonna benefit so many students.
Yeah.
He's just thinking of Tunxis.
Totally.
So,
Some more to do.
I don't know about any
I'm
other
sorry,
colleges.
I couldn't quite hear. So 55% are part-time or full-time?
55% are part-time.
Yeah.
Full-time students, average age is 23. All
Yeah.
students average age, as you know, could be,
Yeah.
our oldest student is
Right.
92, our youngest is 13.
Right.
We
we
So,
understand.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I wish we think that the iLottery proposal, if it's the one that gets set aside and gets devoted to this program, will provide us some opportunity to think about expanding the program to other populations, but we need to walk before we can run.
Right, so
And this is where we're starting.
Just one more if I may. Did you give any consideration to our clock hour type continuing ed programs which are very career focused, such as registered medical assistants, and where students have very few financial aid opportunities?
Yeah. This program applies to certificate programs, and the associate degrees at the community college. We didn't put much limitations on what your end goal was when you begin to attend community college. Our hope is that most students will obviously go on to earn an associate's degree if that's what they're really dedicated to doing, but it's available for a number of certificate programs as well.
I'm sorry about that. I think you're referring to the credit-based certificate.
Yeah, probably,
Some
yes.
subsets
Yeah.
in range. We
Right.
have a number of certificate programs which don't
Non-credit
get college
based.
credit, they're clock hour programs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A
those
lot of them are
would,
in health career fields.
those would not be covered, but I'd love to learn more about those programs. Maybe we can chat after about future iterations of this program if it's
Yeah.
successful.
Yeah. Good point. Thank you.
And those are programs where a lot of students are drawn away to the proprietaries.
Right.
Yeah.
Do go into debt.
Right.
Quite a bit of that.
I just wanted to clarify, 61% is our part-time population
Okay.
here in Tunxis this semester.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. Well, we will stick around
Yeah.
if you have any additional questions, but thank you again so much for being here.
And please take seriously our request to enlist your support for this program. Send Governor Lamont a thank you card. Without his work, which is the last final step, this is not going to be fully realized. So please complete a card, and we'll make sure it gets to him to sort of thank him for his work.
And thank you again to Representative D'Amico, Representative Exum, and Senator Slapp for supporting this. We're really grateful.
Yeah, thank you.